Hi everyone, in this video I'd like to show you a sample web app I put together that is based on Plotly and Dash, two open source Python libraries. Now when you first click on the link, the app is going to take a little while to load. That's because no instance of the container is currently active. Once I click on the URL, Cloud Run's going to wake up the container, but that takes a little while. So here's a login page, so I'll just put in hello world here. If you need your app to load more quickly, you can keep the app and its CPU active at all times, but you'll probably then incur some additional charges. So this app is designed to replicate a very basic school network dashboard. All the data here is fictional. It was created randomly, but it's really designed to show you how you can use Plotly and Dash to create an interactive dashboard. So for instance, here we have a dashboard showing the current enrollment at 4 different schools here. Right now it's just showing comparisons by school, but we can easily change that by, say, selecting grade here, and now it's showing comparisons by school and by grade. We can also add in another comparison, such as gender. Now, if I want to simplify this chart, I can select a pattern variable, such as gender. And now we see that all the female bars are solid, and then all the male bars are striped, and so that simplifies the interface a little bit. We can also deselect that. If we want to see total network enrollment, we can just deselect all the comparison options, and so now we just see a total enrollment of 4,000. There's no comparison option to enter into the color or pattern variable, so no color or pattern has been applied beyond the default. You can also see that whenever I update the table here, we also have a data table that's updated here as well. It's also possible to filter the data, so let's refresh the page to go back to the regular chart, and now you can see it loads a lot more quickly because we have an active container going. Say I want to see data by school, by grade, and by race, but only for one school. So I can select those for comparisons. We have a very busy chart now, but if I remove these 3 schools, it becomes a little easier to view, and then I can simplify it further by selecting a color for grade. And then if I want to select a pattern for race, I can do that, but I think just having just a color variable I think works fairly well here. So let's take a look at some of the other pages within this multi-page Dash app. For instance, we can go to test results, and for test results we actually have a line chart here. Now in this case, the comparison options automatically determine the color and pattern variable. For instance, if I remove this comparison option, we just see one line showing the change in network test scores from the fall to the spring. If I add school as a comparison option, that first option will determine the color of the lines. Then if I add a second one, such as grade, that will determine the pattern of the lines. Now, this is a pretty busy chart right here, but we can again use the filters. So say I want to show only 2 schools, and maybe I only want to show 2 grades, maybe grades 1 and 12. I can do that here. And now the chart's a little more readable. Now notice that if I remove all of the filters for a given category, we just end up with a blank chart, and that's because in this case we're telling Plotly to display no schools, and that's exactly what it does. It displays no schools whatsoever. However, I can revert this by adding another school, or simply by refreshing the page. And finally, let's take a look at our graduation outcomes graph. This chart has graduation year and graduation outcome hard-coded as the first 2 comparison variables. So if we hover over this data, we can see the graduation year and the outcome. So in this case, we see that 136 students went to a 4-year college after graduating in 2021. We can also, as always, add in additional comparison options. So in this case, if I want to see how outcomes have changed by year, I can, for instance, select starting year as the color variable, and that will show that over the years, again, this is all fictional data, we've seen an increase in students going to 4-year colleges, as well as an increase in students going to trade schools. And then, as always, we can modify our other comparison options and filter options to really produce the kind of graph that we're most interested in. Note that because these are graduating students, we only have 1 grade by default, and that's grade 12. So Plotly has a lot of great built-in chart tools as well. Say that we have a busy chart, like graduation outcomes by school and by gender. We can then just hover over the chart and click and hold to select one particular area, and that lets us focus in on one part of the chart. To undo that, we can just press Reset Axes to get back to the original chart. We can also filter data using the legend, which is very convenient. So if I want to deselect 4-year college outcomes, I can just press it once. Meanwhile, if I double-click 4-year college, then that's the only bar that appears. And then if I want to show the other bars again, I can just double click on For Your College and that makes them reappear. So we're back in the current enrollment dashboard, and Plotly also makes it possible to save static copies of the data you see on dashboard. For instance, if I want to save this chart as a PNG file, I can simply click the camera button and it downloads. In addition, if I want to export this chart data, I can click Export and it'll download. So here's a look at the CSV file we just downloaded. So you have that same data available in a much easier to share format. And then we also have the image. Now, admittedly, the image quality is not the best. So to be honest, what I would probably do in this case is simply take a screenshot using my regular clipping tool. So if I take a screenshot there, actually this is slightly better image quality, so I would probably just do that instead. So thanks to some great code written by Ginny Zor on the Plotly forums and Nader El-Shahabi on GitHub, I was able to add a login feature to this Dash app. So to demonstrate that, I'll just log out again here. So there are a couple of different ways to implement a login functionality within Dash, but I like this option because it's free, but it's also a bit more powerful than the basic auth login method. So I'll just enter my username here. If I put in hello and then say test, it'll say, oh, that's not a correct combination, please try again. So instead, if I put in hello and then world as suggested in the page, I'm logged in. Obviously, this is not the most secure password, but it will do for demonstration purposes. And once that container is loaded, you can see that it doesn't take too long to navigate between the different pages of the app. The dashboards also use the Dash Bootstrap Components library to create a more responsive layout. So you'll notice that as I narrow the width of the window, the locations of the filters will also change. All right, now I'll briefly walk through some of the code used to create this dashboard. The code is all released under the MIT license, so you're welcome to apply it for your own work, including commercial use. First, we just have the README. This provides a little bit more information about the dashboard, along with more detailed instructions about how I set up these dashboards. Most of the app.py file that serves as the heart of the dashboard is really just the login functionality that Ginny Zor and Nader El-Shahabi put together. So a lot of this page here is really their own work. One of the most important code files is app functions and variables.py. This file has a number of different functions that the other pages rely on. So for instance, it has code about connecting to a database, retrieving data from a database table, merging in demographics, creating a list of filters and comparisons like the ones you see here. One of the most important functions in this file that helps create the interactive charts you see here is create pivot for charts. It essentially takes the comparison and filter options that the user selects here and then turns that into a pivot table, and there are also functions that take that pivot table and turn it into either a bar chart as you see here or as a line chart. So I certainly won't go into detail here, but the code has quite a bit of documentation. Then finally, each page within the dashboard has its own file within the Pages folder. These files aren't actually all that complex because much of the code that they use derives from app functions and variables. So by putting that code in this file, I was able to really simplify the layout of the current enrollment page, the grad outcomes file, and also the test results file, although some custom code had to be added in. And then if you're curious as to how I put together the fake data that's shown, you can see that within the database generator Python file. And that's it for this project. I really enjoyed putting it together. Dash and Plotly are a blast to work with. There's definitely a bit of a learning curve, but that's true with, I think, any library of this magnitude. So I definitely encourage you to look into the code. Feel free to use it for your own needs. And I hope you have as much fun working with these libraries as I have. And thanks so much for watching.